So, I'm nearly 50 years old now, 50 next year, and been around bikes a long time. And I was just thinking about the first time I ever saw a mountain bike and how that felt, and how amazed we were by them, and as basic as they were, those early ATBs that started appearing in the mid-80s. It was mind-blowing, because at that time you either had a BMX bike, if you were lucky, or you had, which most of us did, your dad's rally 5-speed Europa road bike, drop bars, way too big for you, terrible brakes. On mine, the handlebars were taped up with electrical insulation tape instead of bar tape, so there was no grip at all in the rain, and certainly no comfort. And if you came off the saddle and had to put your feet down quick, the bike was so big that you would do yourself a serious injury. So that was me at 11 years old. And then these mountain bikes started, or ATBs as they were known at the time, started to appear. First time I saw one, a friend of mine had been bought one, and my mind was just completely blown by it. And you've got to bear in mind, these bikes, the only other options at the time, a few people still had their grifters and things like that. BMX was huge, or like I say, you used your dad's bike, but BMX, obviously with 20-inch wheels and single speed, you couldn't exactly ride up hills and up mountains and things. You could hang around the street with your mates, but we were in Wales in the mid-80s, and there were mountains everywhere, and all of a sudden these bikes started to appear that you could go out all day on, and you could ride up hills, and the massive gear ranges, and because the gear range on your dad's 5-speed was terrible, you were constantly grinding the gears. So let me show you some of those early sort of mid-80s ATBs that I've got here at the moment, and try and put yourself in the place of an 11-year-old at the time that's never seen anything like it before. And you can't go back to that again now. You see something for the first time once, and it was just mind-blowing. So I'll show you these bikes now, and we'll talk through it. So imagine you're riding around on your dad's far too big for you road bike. It's got 5 gears. You can't ride uphill because it's too over geared for you. It's huge, frame's too big for you, and then all of a sudden you see something like this. And the first one that I saw was my mate's rally Mustang, which is this one here, and it was just mind-blowing. Like, the tyres, they're 1.9, but at the time that was considered huge. These massive motocross style brake levers, these shifters that we'd never seen before, these friction thumb shifters, cantilever brakes with the straddle cables, and the triple crank with what was at the time a huge gear range. I mean, it was 15 gears, but at the time, when you've been riding your dad's 5-speed road bike, that was mind-blowing. So yeah, they were offered by Peugeot and Rally and brands like Imel. These were like a catalogue brand, so a lot of things when we were kids would be bought out of your nan's or grand's catalogue, and your parents could pay it off weekly. So a bike like this was probably in that catalogue for £199, and you could pay 36 weeks of £3.80 or something, to get the bike. And that's how a lot of us ended up with our first mountain bikes, certainly amongst my friends. And it just opened up so much. I mean, suddenly you had these chunky tyres, these massive gear ranges. You could go off-road, we could go down the tracks that had always been there, but we were ruining our road bikes trying to ride down them. The fat tyres. I mean, this Peugeot has got fatter tyres than it would have had on it. These are quite modern tyres, but this is the Rally here. is typical of what you would have had, which is like a 1.95 maybe tyre, but compared to your dad's road bike with 21 or 23 mil tyres at the time, it was like having a motorbike. It was just incredible. I can remember now the feeling the first time of going on what was a mountain bike ride, even though they weren't called mountain bikes at the time, they were called ATBs, all-terrain bikes. And you can see that all-terrain is written on quite a few of these old bikes. You'll see the words all-terrain, because they were called ATBs at the time because Gary Fisher was developing the clunker into the first of his mountain bikes, and I think he was trying to copyright mountain bike as a brand. So at the time, a mountain bike was a brand rather than a type of bike, so these were known as ATBs, all-terrain bikes. And I still think in some ways to this day that's a better name for them, because it sort of more encompasses what these bikes can do, because they don't just ride mountains, they can ride just about anything. And I mean, you've got to understand that mountain biking in the 80s was nobody was jumping off 20-foot cliffs and things and doing the Red Bull Rampage and that type of thing. This was just kind of exploring with your mates, you know, up the mountain. You would ride up the mountain, you would ride up the side of a mountain, spend all day up there, ride back down. You know, your wheels probably would barely leave the floor. These things weighed a ton, so it took some getting off the ground. But that's what mountain biking was. It just opened up this exploration of terrain that you couldn't previously have considered riding on a bike. And you couldn't do it on your BMX, even though they worked well off-road. The wheels were too small, and you had a single gear. You know, you just couldn't get the range out of it, and then all of a sudden you had this massive spread of gears, these tiny little granny rings, which made you feel like a superhero because you could just spin up anything with them. And again, after grinding around on a road bike, they felt ridiculous, those granny rings. It was like effortless at the time, even though by today's gearing ratio standards, you know, it's not that low. But yeah, these were the start of it all, you know. They were iconic bikes, and they're still fun bikes to ride today if you use them for what they're capable of doing. You wouldn't want to go down a red trail centre route on one, but yeah, they're still great to ride. But can you imagine being 11 years old and seeing this for the first time? Like I say, those big brake levers and the fat tyres and the new types of gear shifting and the huge gear ranges. It was absolutely mind-blowing, and you can never go back. You know, you only see something for the first time once, but I'll never forget seeing my mate's rally Mustang and looking at my dad's racer that I was riding at the time and thinking, oh no, because all I wanted from them was an ATB. And I did get one fairly sort of soon afterwards. I used to go and look at these Peugeot Rangers in the local bike shop. I did have one, and it was an awesome bike. And I sort of rode MTBs, you know, right through the 80s and 90s then, and of course everything changed in the 90s with development of suspension and aluminium frames. These bikes are all made of high tensile steel, but yeah, that all changed in the 90s, and suspension and geometry changes and better brakes and eventually disc brakes. But these were, you know, these were the beginning. These were my first glimpse at sort of off-road cycling, and I'm so glad that they were. I'm so glad I was around at that time to experience it, because it was absolutely mind-blowing. I still love riding these bikes to this day. Like, I ride this Peugeot all the time. It's just great fun, and every time I ride it, somebody will stop, normally somebody my age, and, you know, talk to me about the bike and say they used to have one, or they remember when they did. So yeah, these bikes mean a lot to a lot of people, and just thought I'd share with you how it all started for us oldies.